This is a walk and talk. I don't know how well it'll work because I don't have a microphone for this Russian phone, because they have stopped importing them and the jack is not the normal sort of, or the port is not the normal one for Android phones. And my phone doesn't work in Russia because it's not Russian. But we'll see if we can figure something out in days to come. Anyway, for now, this is just a little spiel. I'll give you a look there. That's the river here in Arkhangelsk. And I wanted to talk to you about all of this nonsense going on in South Africa. I spoke about this. I said something very similar to what I'm going to say now in an interview with Marius just a couple of days ago. So this is not really new, but perhaps it bears mentioning in slightly different words and mentioning all over again. I had a boss, actually strictly speaking a client, called Jameson. This is not the point, but I'll mention to you that he is one of the two most perspicacious people I've ever met. Perspicacious means like shrewd, but in a good way, with insight, intuition, a shrewd understanding. That guy could see right through a matter. He's a really sharp guy, but as I say, it's neither here nor there. Jameson once made the mistake of being talked into employing a woman who was very practically brain dead. She spun a good spiel, young, black, female, and she claimed to be all sorts of things that she wasn't. And she was properly stupid. And Jameson employed her on the basis of this great big fib, and multiplied by the fact that she was black and female. So here's an up and coming black female, you know, it's a good combo. If you're BEE conscious. And Jameson, his surname is Hlongwane. Obviously, as a black man, he has sympathy for BEE. So he employed her, and she I can hardly describe how badly this woman messed up. Eventually, she left. After it became apparent that she could pose like a master. She could represent herself very well, but she couldn't read, write, or count, not properly anyway, and she certainly couldn't think. So off she goes. And one day, well, I had to clean up her mess, a shocking mess that she made of a huge budget. And I was furious. I was furious that that she'd been given a chance at all in the first place, because it was apparent to me that she was a bullduster. She oversold herself. She claimed to have done things which would have meant that she was well known in the industry. And I'd never heard of her. So I didn't feel she should have ever been given a chance. And what's more, I was furious that I, of all people, now had to clean up her mess. And one day I lost my temper over the thing. You know, just I was being temperamental in the office, and I said something like, whatever, stupid idiot, or I can't remember what it was that I said, but it was strong words, make no mistake. I wouldn't have held back. You can bet your bottom dollar that I was properly offensive. That part we can all agree on. Whatever I said, I said. And a coloured woman, Jameson's PA as it happens, overheard me. And she reported me to Jameson for racism and sexism. And I kind of came on the scene just as this was happening. By coincidence, I walked around the corner. And I heard Jameson saying to her, Jameson knew me very well. Very, very, very well. I think as well as any person in my life, or as very few people in my life knew me up to that point. And he said to her, Corin, we can all be grateful for the fact that this woman in question, is black and female. Because if it had been a white male, there would be blood on the floor by now. Simon would have properly lost his temper. Trust me when I tell you that he's restraining himself only because she's a black female. And I think that black people in South Africa most fail to understand that intuition, that perceptiveness, that wisdom that Jameson displayed in that moment. What he said was dead true. And I think that it applies to much of the new South Africa Rainbow Nation. Let me put it to you this way. Hendrik Verwoerd was assassinated going by the best evidence, it seems now, 60 years later. Ultimately by mining interests. On the day that he was meant to give a speech in Parliament declaring that the special mining companies tax of only 10% would be rescinded, and that mining companies would have to pay company tax as all other companies in South Africa had to pay company tax, so on the same scale. I think that if the ANC was a white government, by now people like, not to be slanderous, I'm trying to illustrate a point. I don't mean to slander, and I don't mean to be particular as if I think it's real. I'm being particular only to illustrate a point. I think that by now the Oppenheimers, Ruperts and others would have assassinated senior members of government. I don't think that the ANC and perhaps blacks generally appreciate the extent to which they've gotten something like a free pass from the media and from white South Africans generally I don't think, I'm positive that if this was a white government, we would have done things the European way. If this was during apartheid and the government was as hopeless, stupid, useless, disinclined, venal, lazy, and destructive as it is. If this was Europe, or if this was during apartheid, so in other words, in a non-European setting, but a setting dominated by a European mentality, by now the great powers of the country would have ensured that lessons had been learned in the absence of an ability to listen. You don't want to listen? You don't want to hear? Right, we'll make the message clear. Because the level of weakness is just that bad. And the point would have come where some sober-minded individual would have said, the electricity interruptions have led to the deaths of 15 babies, whatever. The water problems have caused whatever. You know, they would have rationalized it. This is the cost of this government. Therefore, to kill one person is cheap at the price. The price that they pay is not a high price, given the price that they have caused us to pay. The ANC seems to think that those of us who criticize them are impatient. But that's patently, palpably stupid, because we didn't criticize for decades. The ANC seems to think that we're motivated solely by racism, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. If the ANC had proved to be what it promised, white people would be displaying the same giddiness as they displayed in the mid-90s, and as the overwhelming majority of them displayed when Cyril Ramaphosa was elected president of the ANC over Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. That much is demonstrable. You can't dispute it. We all saw the photographs of pretty little joggers posing next to Cyril Ramaphosa on the parade, not the grand parade, I mean like the embankment, whatever it is in Sea Point. The marine parade of Cape Town, or the embankment. There's no question of what I'm saying. Nobody can say. We're being accused of something that we haven't done. We have not been nasty about the ANC because the ANC is black. Just as Jameson Tlongwane was pointing out to Corin, Simon is being nasty because that little minx came in here telling lies. And fooled us into employing her, and then proceeded to cost us enormous sums of money when she knew full well that she hadn't a clue what she was doing. But if she had been a white male, he would have cut her no slack. There would have been no sympathy. No, well, I'll take into account that, and let me not forget the other, and who knows where she came from, and the African National Congress simply cannot see that the criticisms that are swirling now in this larger scenario of Donald Trump taking refugees or asylum seekers. Who knows what the true legal status is? I've heard different terms used by equally proper parties. In other words, parties that should both know precisely what is the legal status of those people are not using the same term, or contradicting one another. Somebody's wrong. This larger scenario of refugees and farm murders and whites are nasty and so on. And I think that's worth mentioning. I think it's worth mentioning that if this had been a white government and it was so abysmally bad, shockingly, willfully perverse, willfully hopeless, willfully rubbish at everything it does, by now heads would have been chopped off. By now a group of tycoons would have taken appropriate action on the basis, not of race, but on the basis that a few dead perpetrators is not wicked when those perpetrators have cost the country and the economy and the financial world. Not to mention the tycoons themselves. Yeah, the self-interest part we all know. Billions. They would have said, the ANC is getting the bargain of a lifetime. 100 billion for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lives is cheap at the price. They've got nothing to complain about. By now they should get the message. And I think that this is worth saying. I think it's worth pointing out to black people. You know, I've lost contact with all of the black people with whom I used to deal, because I know them well enough to know that the moment that my name surfaced in the USA in 2017 with Suidlanders, that they would have immediately assumed that I was showing my true colors and that in fact I'd always hated black people. And it's simply not true. Which is why I get on so well with black people. As I told the story the other day of my maid coming to me on a day that she wasn't coming to work, just popping in to tell me, to gossip, that the previous day in Van der Kloof, the maids waiting for the taxi had held a debate over who's the best employer in Van der Kloof, and she said, her words, all of them decided in the end that it's you. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should start hating black people more, but it's just not the way I'm manufactured. My motives for being in Suidlanders are not to hate black people. My motives are to do with the prophecies. Before I had anything to do with Suidlanders, I read 6 books on Sina van Rensburg. 6. And for those of you who don't know the story, I had a very, very unique experience where I was the sole witness to the, look, it's a long story, but to do with the fulfillment of 3 Sina van Rensburg prophecies. And I took it as a sign from God. And I'm quite happy to stand up for my mother, my father, my people, if there's going to be a race war in South Africa. No worries. But am I motivated by hatred? No. And I don't think that it is this strange failure to comprehend. It's a bit like dealing with this is a bit like dealing with those women who, if they ask you if their skirt fits well, or if there's a bulge showing since giving birth, and you say, yeah, a bit of a bulge there, they construe that to mean that you believe that they're a bad mother and a horrible person. It's just ridiculous. This what the ANC is manufacturing out of this conversation, this discussion, this frustration, this fury at farm murders and the decline of the economy and the hopeless state of Eskom and Johannesburg's, as it was revealed yesterday, 163 billion rand electricity bill delinquency, and so on and so forth ad infinitum. I think I've said enough.